Left of the box. The state of housing in Canada is also horrible. And there's this little video from Global News saying Canada housing crisis. 3% of renters were evicted in the past year. That's a lot. And I posted a video not too long ago because I've been talking a lot about renters and housing and stuff. And so many people are like, well, if you didn't want to be worried about being kicked out, you should have never chosen to rent. Like I have that option. So what, on my disability, I'm just going, what, buy a house?
Well, I mean, it's either rent or be homeless.
Yeah. If you're living in a tent encampment, you still have no say often when they come and, take away all your belongings and throw them in trash like they're nothing. Like, a lot of people who rent aren't doing it by choice, and there's a really shocking little video thingy that we're going to get to in just a moment, but just wanted to play this.
If you look at all the renters across Canada, 3% were evicted in the past year. And this comes as demand for rentals has outpaced supply in most major markets, boosting rental costs to new heights. The trend is driven by increasing immigration and home ownership costs that have forced many who would like to buy to rent instead. So it's important to take stock of what's happening. Now, no surprise, it shows more than half of evictions are due to landlord factors. That includes landlords taking over units for their own use, selling the property, or evicting existing tenants for renovations or major repairs. So-called renovictions saw a huge jump in some regions. In Hamilton, Ontario, they increased nearly 1,000% between 2017 and 2022. The second most common reason for eviction, the tenant having difficulty paying rent. According to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's 2024 market rental report, there isn't enough affordable housing for lower income renters in most cities. Many evictees share some common factors too. Nearly 60% were between the ages of 25 and 44, and a third between the ages of 25 to 34. Nearly half reported fair or poor mental health. Nearly a third identified as living with a disability. The federal government is promising a renter's bill of rights in next week's budget, but housing advocates say that based on what's been announced, it's not likely to meaningfully improve affordability for people struggling to make ends meet or find an affordable place to rent. Anne Gaviola, Global News.
Yeah, and I went over that renter's bills of right in a different video, which was just a bunch of hot air. It's like, oh, well, now your rent payments can go towards your credit to help you buy that home. And it's like, no, that's not going to help anyone buy a home. Like,
it's not.
It's so frustrating because, again, it's not like we're choosing to be in these situations. And for all the unhoused people, there's still so many people who are precariously housed, who might lose their apartment at any time, who are struggling to pay for it because there's nothing affordable. And whenever you hear the government talk about like, oh, we're making all these affordable units and stuff like that, it's never nearly enough. And what they deem as affordable isn't actually affordable. Affordable in government standards is considered 80% of market rate, which is not affordable to pretty much anyone living with a disability. Like, there's nowhere. If I lose my place in the contract that I currently have, I'm done. Like, there's nowhere I can go in the country with disability and be able to afford to pay rent. Like, nowhere is left. And the options would be like trying to find a friend that I can move in with or move back home. And that would be, if I had mental health problems before, I'm just like, moving back home with family would not be beneficial.
And one of the consequences of this housing crisis that we have is I see a lot of rhetoric being used against immigration and immigrants about how it's immigration is the reason why we have a housing crisis. And I'll just say point blankly, no, it's not. The reason why we have a housing crisis is because federal government has not been in housing in a meaningful way since the late 80s, early 90s. And that's now 3 decades of the feds not be in public housing, affordable housing, um, uh, encouraging rezoning efforts, all the things that you see being announced. There's 30 years of neglect behind that. So I wanted to be very clear that it's not immigration, and I don't. And the argument that immigration is the reason why we have a housing crisis just sets up
Mhm.
for immigration to be scapegoated in other ways.
Mhm.
And we all know what happens when immigrants become scapegoated.
Mhm.
So like it's bad. And it's all because the feds decided, conservatives and liberals, the neoliberal consensus, decided to get out of the way of helping people with housing. And here we are. And who could have predicted it except everybody who was saying something for 30 years?
Yeah. Like, I do think that the amount of people being let in right now isn't helping, but it's not the fault of the immigrants. Again, it is what you're saying. It's the fault of the government not being up to par with housing. But, like, what do we do in the meantime? It is just, but it's a lot of people also not understanding that a lot of the newcomers, a lot of the people that come into this country aren't permanent residents. So they're not exactly harming the housing supply because they're not buying homes. And a lot of people still just want to blame immigrants for the high housing costs when it's like, no, that's not the issue. We're actually going to get into the issue in just a little bit. And so it is a multi-layered issue. And anyone who tries to point at immigration and saying it's the issue, they're just being racist. Like it is just, they're being racist. They're trying to use them as a scapegoat.
Well, I saw an article recently, and the headline had mentioned, um, is this the endpoint of Canada's multiculturalism? And for those who don't know, multiculturalism is enshrined within our Canadian like values, within our government. Um, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like it's a document that talks about Canada's values and ethics and whatever. And multiculturalism is officially within that. And I've seen articles now talking about how that no longer should be the case for Canada because of high immigration. And so, this isn't going to go away. This attack on multiculturalism that we've had for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
That's being attacked when people say that immigration is the cause of our housing crisis.
It's not the cause. There's it's such a complex issue. And again, it hasn't been tackled properly since the late 80s in no meaningful way. Just little crumbs tossed out here and there. And I went over an example of it with Justin Trudeau not too long ago saying, "Oh, we made all these affordable units, blah 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 blah, affordable rental units." But the funding for those affordable rental units are going away in a couple of years. And then at that point, all the turnover, as they turn over, they're going up to market rent. So it wasn't a permanent affordable unit. It was just a temporary one so that he could catch the headlines and look good.